is this now a confidence issue for the Bank of Japan?
Oh, I don't think it's a confidence issue, but there's a big question mark. I mean, everyone just said about what are they going to be doing next, and should they be joining the hawkish party by major global central banks? I mean, my argument is no. And I think one thing that perhaps Kathleen may have missed, if you look at the Bank of Japan's preferred measure of inflation, it's still quite low. So, you know, we have headline above 2% a little bit, but that preferred measure is running like 0.8. There's no great push for them to change YCC just yet.
Does it, you know, this whole policy that they've instituted have succumb to the law of diminishing returns? You know, it does seem like they're not going anywhere. But, you know, then we had a guest yesterday who said, well, if they didn't do it, what would it look like?
Well, I think, yeah, you do raise a point. You're pushing on the string. I mean, how much extra juice are you going to get from this policy when the rest of the world is increasingly moving, as I said, in this hawkish stance? And can a weekend really boost their, whether growth or also the inflation profile for them? That's not the easiest thing to do. But I think, as you said, I mean, the market is going to keep testing them. Now, let's say a different scenario happens today, that they were to widen the YCC just a little bit. You know, the risk, of course, for the central bank is that immediately the bond market and the currency market begins to test them again. And I think they have to be very careful in terms of managing that message today.
Deutsche Bank had an interesting take on this, saying that, you know, how does YCC end? And they think that it's not going to be anything that's going to be smooth. In fact, it's going to be a mess. What sort of implications could that have for FX and rates? Well,
I think that's an interesting point, because let's go back to when the S&P removed its Swiss franc floor a number of years ago. Oh, yeah. You know, that was quite disruptive for financial markets.
The dollar went straight through the floor straight away.
Well, the Swiss franc absolutely exploded. So, you know, you get caught in this trap, so to speak. So it's going to be very difficult to try and manage that exit. But this is what I said before. If they tried to just tinker a little bit, immediately the risk is that the market begins to test them. So my view is, you know, eventually the Japanese yen will recover. I'm not expecting a change in YCC. I mean, that's also the house view that we have.
Swiss franc, is it now, and has been perhaps for the last 10 years, the proxy for the old mark, the Deutsche Mark?
Yeah, it does sound like the S&B is in favor of a strong currency policy. And I think that's also been evident even over the last year or so. But equally, you know, the Swiss National Bank, they're worried about inflation being in the high 2s. I mean, that sounds quite comfortable in the context of the Bank of England.
They go to parity against the euro now, I mean, essentially.
Well, that's essentially where we think it's going to as well. So, yes, I mean, they want that strong currency. They want to have tighter monetary policy, and I don't think it's going to be slowing.
What does dollar then do then? I wonder, if you have all these central banks kind of joining in on the fray, should I now expect for dollar to peak a bit sooner?
Well, that's a really good question. My answer is no. And I think that we have to ask ourselves which central banks can actually really deliver on that tightening that the interest rate market is trying to price in. Now, I think that from a credibility standpoint, what the markets are pricing in, I think that the Fed actually can deliver on that front, trying to get their policy rate up to close to 4% in the early part of next year.
A path of least resistance for sterling now and cable?
Down. The short answer is we've had a nice little bounce yesterday, but I don't think it's going to be sustainable. We think it's going down to 120. Not too far, but direction of travel is lower, not higher.